PR.
Support for WMNF comes from listeners like you and WEDU PBS. You can watch a special tribute to Rob Lorai, one of WMNF's founders and long-term News and Public Affairs Director. This Friday, August 29th at 8:30 p.m., WEDU will air a special episode of Florida This Week, celebrating the life and legacy of Rob Lorai. Learn more at wedu.org.
And good morning and welcome to The Skinny for Friday, August 29th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief with Creative Loafing Newspaper. Happy Labor Day weekend, Ray.
Happy Labor Day weekend. And I'm excited to have 3 days off.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got, I was going to go see Stevie Nicks actually tomorrow night, scheduled to play
Fast Healing
at the arena formerly known as the Amalie Arena. Now she injured her shoulder and won't be here until December, but anyway, I'll enjoy the weekend as well.
Now called the Benchmark International Arena is what it's called. Yeah.
Okay,
they call it the bench or the BIA.
Okay, so in just a few minutes, we're going to speak with Jake Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Tampa Bay Young Republicans. Look forward to having Jake here in studio. But first, I do want to say something here about the passing of Rob Lorai. You may have been listening to Down and Dirty. We just had a whole hour tribute to Rob. There's going to be, you just heard also, WEDU is going to have a show honoring his legacy this evening. And I wanted to say something here, Ray, and for a moment, because, I worked, I came, basically, I think if Rob did not like me, I would not be sitting here 25 years later, because I was hired by, WMNF back in 2000, leaving the San Francisco Bay Area to begin my career, which I didn't know I'd last here 25 years in the Tampa Bay area, here at WMNF when I was hired as the assistant news director back in March of 2000. And so, this is, as we've been talking about, this has been a really hit hard for so many people in this community. That's the thing I really take from it, and we have our own personal, feelings about this, and it's a great loss. It's a great loss for the Tampa Bay area community because he was so prominent for literally over 40 years here at MNF from the late 70s until 2021, and then of course, on WEDU for 20 plus years. So one of the most prominent voices of media in Tampa in history, basically. And so it's such a huge loss, and I really wanted to acknowledge that on this program. Last week we did the Tampa City Council debate, so we couldn't talk about that then, but I did want to spend a couple minutes here to mention him, honor him, and mourn his passing.
Yeah, it's wild to kind of talk about him on the air, and we've appeared for the taping for WEDU, and it's like this, when people die, it's hard to come to grips with the fact that their bodies expired, and they're not here anymore. And I think that's happening, and the grieving process is long. And hopefully, there's a time when, a Rob Lorai can be more common, the next Rob Lorai or another Rob Lorai. Because the media landscape certainly does look a lot different than the one that Rob kind of built out for himself. Well,
and again, he was one of many people, I don't know how many, but, it wasn't just Rob, of course, who helped create the station in the late 70s, came literally down here knocking door to door. It's kind of a fable, but it's true. It's just a huge loss. And, can I just say that, cancer, this cancer just takes so many people away who were, it's just a horrible thing. It never gets better. And, it's just terrible. And, he died at the age of 70, which is just far too young. And he had so much more to give to everybody here. And so, everybody's going to miss him. And I just wanted to acknowledge that to start off today's program.
Yeah, he was definitely bummed to be leaving even EDU at the time. He still felt like he had a lot of stuff that he needed to cover, a lot of conversations.
I saw him 6 weeks ago. My friend Melissa and I, we saw him 6 weeks ago tonight in Ybor at the Dirty Shame bar. And in fact, I just covered David Jolly, and so he wanted to talk about David Jolly's campaign. He was really into it, and he was still, he was still totally with it. In terms of his wits, we knew, it was just tough that the cancer definitely had an effect, but he was still out there. And you mentioned in the earlier hour, he was at the No Kings protest, and he was out there taking photos, and people looked at his Facebook page. So
he had a byline in La Gazzetta,
right, when Patrick went on vacation. So anyway, we could talk the rest of the hour. We're not going to do it here. Maybe we'll some other show going forward because, again, it just can't wrap something up in such a short amount of time. But anyway, we're talking about politics right now. This is the what I breathe for here, obviously, in covering Tampa politics, Florida politics. And Jake Hoffman's here. Jake, good morning.
Morning.
Great to see you. And just to remind listeners, again, Jake Hoffman is the executive director of the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, who I know you guys always boast you're one of the biggest young Republican clubs in the state, if not the country.
Yeah. One of the second or third largest in the country, which is nice. And then I'm also our state committee man for the Florida Young Republicans, and I'm actually our international chair for the National Young Republicans. The organization goes all the way up. People don't realize it's kind of aligned with the GOP the same way the DNC works and everything, where there's chapters, city, state, national.
Now, how long are you officially a quote unquote young Republican?
Until you're 40 years old, then we throw you out.
Okay.
How old are you, Jake?
I'm 34.
Oh,
so I got
you're only 34. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I have a little bit of time.
Absolutely.
Before they throw me out.
So I want to bring you in. And by the way, you were on the show a couple years ago when I actually physically wasn't here, if you remember. I had COVID, actually. I had to do it from Zoom. And so I'm happy to be here in studio to talk the issues. I also want to bring up, there's a lot to go with. I was looking at your X account last night. Let's bring you in talking about something. No, that some of our listeners might actually be in common cause with you on. And that is you wrote that Gavin Newsom, California Governor Gavin Newsom, who I think many of our listeners know has been really going wild in his social media team trolling President Donald Trump, and you wrote that you think he's been effective.
Yeah, and something you didn't mention that I do is my actual job is I run a digital media company, and so I'm in the world of communication, especially digital communication, and then from a political consultant observation standpoint. What Gavin Newsom's doing is how the Democrats can come back and win. And I'm trying to almost warn the Republicans, you're complaining about this, you're going on Fox News and you're, bloviating over all of this thing about Gavin Newsom, you're really upset about it. But at the end of the day, what he's doing right now is actually how they can come back. Now, what I wrote in that as well is he's going to struggle with that style. He can't do that in a Democratic primary, right? He can't go against,
Josh Shapiro or
yes, and you
other candidate Democrat like that.
Yeah, you understand the intersectionality politics that kind of goes on in a Democratic primary, and you cannot have Gavin Newsom, who, let's face it, white guy, very privileged, and he's going to be running against people who just assume are minorities, and you can't do this type of style. And that's where he's really going to struggle, I think. And, I like to joke that Democrats like canceling their primaries and rigging their primaries. So I won't give you guys too much on that. but if they're able to do that and make him the actual candidate, then I think that this type of rhetoric, it works. It works for my generation of young people, especially young men. The struggle that Democrats have had with, attracting young men and losing young men, college age, 20s, 30s. This is getting them back. Again, I'm 34 years old and I'm looking at him and I'm laughing. When he tells Tommy Lauren that she's just a Yelp page for toilets, I'm like, that's funny to me. I don't care how much I like Tommy Lauren. It works. It actually works. And I know that it probably turns off a certain electorate.
Yeah, it does.
But at the end of the day, I think that he's meeting Trump where he's at. He's meeting the Republicans where they're at on a lot of their rhetoric. So I think it's actually a really good thing for Democrats, and I'm as a warning to Republicans.
Yeah, interesting. And we should also tell you one of the things you in addition to your job and your part of the Republican Party, you're on the Hillsborough County Doge team.
Correct.
Is that right? So, and this is different than Blazing Goliath's CFO Blazing Goliath's team, which is going into cities and counties like St. Petersburg. By the way, they haven't come to Tampa yet. That's kind of curious.
Yeah, very curious.
Yeah. Okay. There's theories about that, but nevertheless, and we just saw Blazing Goliath the other day talk about Orange County. Now they're issuing subpoenas. So it's because he says that people aren't being straightforward about responding to specifically about DEI initiatives. But what are you doing specifically for Hillsborough Doge right now?
So the Hillsborough Doge Committee was created by our county commission.
Right.
So it is separate from the state's efforts. We've done one meeting so far. It was last month. We actually have our next meeting coming up on Tuesday. It's actually public, so people can show up if they really want to. When?
Yeah, tell us.
I believe it's at 10 or 11 on Tuesday at the county building.
You have to leave your pitchforks outside, right?
I'm the chair, so I got elected chair last month, so I can throw you out if you come in, right? But the local efforts, basically what we've done so far is we've just been accumulating information because it's $10 billion we're talking about here a year.
The budget for Hillsborough County.
And that's not all of it. So this is a multi-year effort that the state's looking back. They're going back 4 or 5 years because they're trying to do some comparisons between what was being spent 4 or 5 years ago and now. And as you guys know, the budgets have increased significantly since 2019 because after 2020 and everybody started moving here, property taxes go up. They're collecting more money. There's a huge difference in the amount of money that was collected 5 years ago versus now. So the effort, I believe, is just to look at how much did prices go up on everything. Have we this is not an issue in Hillsborough County, but other places. Have we hired significantly more people? Have we increased salaries? Have bids for everything? So basically, we were handed 15,000 lines of 4 different documents with all of the money that Hillsborough County spends. So it's a tall order to go through. And it's not like you have exactly the definition of what everything is. This is just line items. Hey, $1 million for this with 3 words about what that is, right? And so now we're left to decipher, well, what is that? And so that's actually what the next meeting is I basically have dug through 15,000 lines of Hillsborough County's expenditures, and I'm going and I'm looking and going, well, this one seems questionable. Now I have questions. And it's not an effort of, it's different than the national level. And I think I want to make that clear to people because there's a bad taste in people's mouth.
From what Elon Musk was up to.
Because Elon Musk came in and was like, fire this entire agency, right? The county's not that big. We don't have entire agencies full of thousands of employees that are totally useless. It's not the same situation that we're looking at. So we're not going to be coming out and saying, come out and fire 10% of the staff. That's just not going to happen. But what we are going to do is we're looking at, well, why did we spend $1 million on this? What is this, miscellaneous? There's a lot of things that are just say miscellaneous with millions of dollars appointed to them, and some things are repetitive, and sometimes it takes a fresh look at the county commissioners are not experts in some of these things, and I'm looking at it as somebody who's from digital media space, from communication space, and I'm looking at subscriptions. Right, we spend all this money on subscription services, and I'm looking and I'm going, does that not cover this? Does that not cover this? I'll give you a tidbit. Like we spend $10,000 a year on Wall Street Journal subscriptions. Okay. And then we spend $50,000 on another all media subscription for the library that covers Wall Street Journal. So we've just found $10,000 that could be cut there because you're paying for the same subscription twice.
Because you get that online. You don't need the physical copy even, right?
And if it's at the library, essentially you would think it would be available. Jake, let me ask you, how did you come to be on the Doge committee? Because at the time, our managing editor, Celine Sanfelice, asked for the applications. And I feel like I would have remembered if you were on there, but I didn't see you in that initial round.
So I missed the initial round.
Okay.
I was busy trying to get on the Sports Authority. It didn't work.
Okay. So how'd you end up on the Doge committee?
I basically I was interested in serving on the Sports Authority originally. That's another story for another time. But after that, I wasn't chosen for that. I was like, well, I've been trying to get on boards for a long time. I'm a controversial figure apparently because it's been very difficult actually. I've been filibustered off the floor. It feels like for many years, and so the Doge committee actually was a effort that I care about, and it's something that I feel passionately about. And so I'm like, all right, well, this is something I actually really want to do. I'm glad I was able to, they did a second round, and then I was able to apply because yes, I wasn't in the first round.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, we're talking to Jake Hoffman. He's the executive president of the Tampa Bay Young Republicans. It's 11:20 here on WNF 88.5 FM. So let's talk about Florida politics. So Jake, it's interesting right now. We talk about Democratic politics all the time here, as much as we can in Florida. Florida Republicans, of course, are where it's all at these days with the 1.3 million something now. It went up again yesterday, officially 1.3 million plus more Republicans than Democrats here in Florida. So the governor's race, okay, this is kind of not interesting yet, but it may be, right? So we have, of course, Byron Donalds, the congressman from the Naples area, who has been endorsed already by Donald Trump and is running away with the race right now. Long way away. We're more than a year away, of course, from less than a year from the nomination, but more than a year from the actual election. He's raised over $22 million the last time I looked at. So the speculation has been, is there going to be another Republican, named Republican, running against him? Jay Collins, now we're hearing Paul Renner. I don't think we're hearing so much about Casey DeSantis. What's the feeling that you feel, because obviously you're so connected to Florida Republicans, about having another person running against Byron Donalds?
Well, I think that this is something that has been talked about quite a bit in Republican circles, Democratic circles as well. As there was an expectation a year ago before Donald Trump won, and if he didn't win, this might have been a 10-person primary. That was the prevailing
Matt
thought.
Gaetz, all these types
Ashley
of people.
Moody, Jay Patronis, Mike Walsh, Wilton Simpson, all these names, and you've seen them all kind of go off and do other things right now. And so that does leave you with a Byron Donalds. And, Trump came out early with an endorsement, and some of our other Congress men and women have also come out with endorsements. And I think Byron Donalds is well liked in Republican circles. I think that we've seen how Republican primaries go. And just we have a good case study just a few years ago, right, with Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. And that is ultimately, what's going on up there. And I don't have any additional insider information to give you on what the decisions that are going to get made up there are, but it will be something that I think could be difficult for people like us that are in the Tampa Bay area, where we have multiple Republicans that we like in a primary, and sometimes that gets a little down and dirty, as you saw in the presidential.
Oh, I want to mention, by the way, again, we're talking to Jake Hoffman, Tampa Bay Young Republicans, a listener objecting to me not jumping on you for saying about totally useless federal workers, I think, a moment ago.
I believe that.
Okay, yeah.
There's I'll give you a quick tidbit to go back on that then. So as doing international work and talking with people, the prevailing media narrative around like cutting U.S. aid has been, Elon Musk is just getting rid of AIDS medication in Africa, and he's killed all these people.
Right.
This is like headline news from the New York Times and all these other people. And when I've traveled internationally in the past 6 months and 8 months, I'm talking to different political leaders, elected officials, and parliament members of different countries all over the European Union, they have all told me the same thing, no matter what party they're from. Thank you for getting rid of U.S. aid. Because U.S. aid was coming in through an NGO and funding my political opponents. The America has funded more political movements, political parties, political candidates through U.S. aid than we have any idea about. And that's something I actually wanted to dig into more and do some real
because I have not
about.
Heard that at all. Read that.
They're not writing about it. But
you're saying that you talked to leaders from other countries?
I can give you direct examples from. I was just in Slovenia. And no one's talking about Slovenian parliament over here, right? It's just not.
No.
We're not going to. They've got $1,000 cap on how much you can donate to political campaigns, and then they were able to point directly to USAID gave money to this NGO, and then this NGO put $100,000 into my opponent's party. And that's happening all over the world. And that was a funnel.
Jake, I guess my questioning that is that why don't Marco Rubio, who has been the face of cutting USAID, talked about this when the overwhelming attention has been that this is going to be hurting people in Africa and other places, and this is devastating cuts. And why wouldn't we hear what you're saying then?
I would assume because Marco Rubio's got 4 jobs, he's too busy.
It's unfortunate.
But yes, I actually think there should be more attention on this. I don't know why they're not talking about it in this manner, because if they were to talk with a lot of these other leaders and elected officials in other countries, they would come to find that we've interfered. I don't think I'm breaking news here that America interferes in other countries' elections.
No, historically we have, for sure.
And we're still doing it just in a different way. And now, and USAID was a funnel to do that. Now, and this is the other issue that you may have heard something about, which is 90% of that money doesn't end up going to that AIDS medication. It goes to the political officials, the NGOs, and all of a sudden, by the time you've gone all the way down to actually buying the medication, 90% has been spent on administrative cost and funneled outside of the country. So this is it's been very inefficient on how to actually get the thing. And so the headlines that get grabbed when they say, we got rid of this AIDS medication in Africa, it's like there was a lot of waste in between getting to that. I guess it would have been nice to hear more about that. Okay, 11:25 in the morning here, WMNF, Mitch Perry, Ray Roa, speaking to Jake Hoffman, Tampa Bay Young Republicans. We were talking about the governor's race, and we haven't finished talking about that. David wants to chime in. David, you're on the air.
Oh, yeah, hey. I was really kind of pleased that Trump, came out and favored Byron Donalds, because I just don't really like the DeSantis family at all, and I'd rather not have another 8 years of DeSantis in the governor's mansion. I just don't think the DeSantises play well with others, and they're I don't know, they just kind of bully people. They're not very collaborative or very cooperative in my opinion. So yeah, I say Donald's for governor.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Jake, that's something that we've talked about in the past on this show. Kind of, how do you view the governor? And a lot of people would argue that the governor seems to be whimpering on the way out. He's got this Hope Florida thing hanging over his head, but the fact is he's still the leader of Florida. Depending on which poll you believe and which one you're reading, maybe is a significant player. But is your group kind of getting kind of sour or tired of talking about Ron DeSantis and looking towards a different kind of future?
I think that Republicans will always love Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida because of COVID will be his legacy. The way that he treated COVID, the way that, this has probably been talked about ad nauseum at this point in politics, but the amount of people who came to this state and people will still come to me and say, I moved to Florida for Ron DeSantis. I moved to Florida for the fact that I could go out to the grocery store.
Even though he did shut it down at first.
Yes. We're a little revisionist history for a couple of weeks, right? But overall, a lot of young people especially came to Florida because they weren't going to be able to get jobs or go out to bars or whatever, that kind of stuff. So people, that meant so much to people that what I've found, and I'm fully immersed in this, people will forgive certain things that maybe the governor is doing now because they will never not love him for what he did for them during the COVID era. And so they now may look over a Hope Florida issue and they'll look past it. And that's actually been something that's fascinating. And I think that there's a bit of, he's gotten such a runway for all the good that he's done that people on the Republican side look past some of the things.
Because if anything needs a dojing, it's Hope Florida.
I have questions. Okay. I have questions.
Alex Andrade does, where it's going to be interesting to see when the session resumes next year, whether that will continue in terms of his. Alex Andrade's been really. I think it's very interesting because you do see a few, as you know, Jake, in the House. Ron DeSantis is so infuriated that these House Republicans, he can't go to a press conference without mentioning the House, and it's not just Daniel Perez, but it's other members of the House, including Alex Andrade and others, who have finally looked at Ron DeSantis and some of the things he's done and go, we don't agree with some of the stuff. Yeah, and I wonder if we'll see more of that in the coming session.
Yeah, I think that there has been, you've been covering, Florida politics for a long time, and before Ron DeSantis, you've obviously had a bit more of a power balance, I believe, in the Senate, in the House, and the governor. And then when the governor is now completely outweighing those two other bodies, he's used that to his advantage, right? And we've had kind of weak speakers and weak Senate leadership, in not that they're weak, but in the sense that they are not as popular as the governor. Yeah. And so they cannot, and you saw this during that whole immigration debate, which wasn't about immigration, and they ended up, trying to flex some muscle and pull some of this power back and balance the three bodies up in Tallahassee. And it's kind of you're going to see more of that, I believe, in this year because they know DeSantis is on his way out.
Right.
Mitch, sorry if you're going to ask this question. Jake, I'm wondering about your feelings here on this situation. We're seeing National Guard troops deployed in Washington, D.C. These are real, mostly young people with lives, and they're out here in uniform. Some of them, standing around and are raking now. Yeah. I'm curious, how you feel about seeing that happening in this country, and then two, if you would welcome a National Guard presence here. I mean, if you compare, crime rates and zip codes, and we can talk about crime statistics and how those are fudged and whatnot all day long. Yeah. You could argue that Ybor has a higher violent crime rate than Washington, D.C. right now. Would you welcome a National Guard here if Trump, all of a sudden targeted Tampa all of a sudden?
No, I actually wouldn't. And something that I've spoke out really loudly about, and I fought privately and publicly with our congressional Republicans about, was after January 6th and all this stuff, we had Capitol Police offices put down here in Tampa. I was the only Republican screaming about how the Capitol Police has no business in Florida.
They had an office they put here at the Hillsborough. I covered a protest actually for Bay News, but Bay News 9 didn't want me to do it. Actually, but they put the first time ever the FBI, I believe, had offices outside of Washington, San Francisco, and in Tampa, because California and Florida were the places that had most J6 protesters at.
That's what I heard, and I heard so many excuses. I could go from law enforcement locally to congressional about why we need the Capitol Police in Florida. It was costing too much to transport all of these people back and forth and all. Whatever the reason is, the Capitol Police have no jurisdiction in the state of Florida, and they shouldn't be here. And it is a scary thing when I start seeing federal presence, especially with something like the Capitol Police, which you can't even FOIA request. They're not even a real agency. They are Capitol Police is secretive for a reason, because they're supposed to be in the Capitol protecting all of our important people. And now I'm seeing what's going on in D.C., and D.C. is a strange place. And so to your question, D.C. is this weird gray area of who's in charge and what, because
the president has more jurisdiction there than he does anywhere else. Although he did do this thing in Los Angeles, which, he brought the National Guard there. For, I guess, an emergency, you can do that, right?
Yeah.
Only for an emergency. But D.C., he is allowed to do what he's doing so far.
Yeah.
But now he's talking about, again, Chicago, these other places. I want to move on if we could, only because, so we're moving here. 11:31 here on 88.5. You're listening to The Skinny here. Mitch Perry with Ray Rowe. We're speaking to Jake Hoffman, the executive director of the Tampa Bay Young Republicans. And I want to say I want to ask you about cannabis, because I know this is an issue that the Republican Party has been divided on here. But first, let me ask you a couple questions about the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, because you had, I don't even know who this character Andrew Tate is, but I know you guys made national news last year when you invited him to speak. I mean, I know, I shouldn't say I don't know anything about it. I know he's associated with, basically being a rapist.
We won't talk about some of the basically, human trafficking was, alleged and involved here.
But Jake, so now did he never actually spoke with your club?
No. So to kind of clear some of the air on that, we had a president for about 6 weeks in the Tampa. The Young Republicans, people don't know, it's not like winning governorship, right? Somebody could take over the organization very, with I don't know, 50 votes, 30 votes. It doesn't take that much to take over an organization sometimes. I was president of the organization from 2018 to 2021, and then we had Brittany, who you may have had on before,
several times.
Yeah, for 2 or 3 years. And then we had another guy who was president for about 6 weeks. That happened under his watch, and he's since resigned. And that was the story. And one of the things that happened with that was there was never any intention of bringing Andrew Tate to the Tampa Bay Young Republicans. It was actually was kind of the governor had come out with a statement about how he wasn't welcome in the state of Florida.
Right.
And the discussion that was taking place behind the scenes was, well, how is our governor saying that someone's not allowed to come to the state of Florida when they're not even technically a criminal in the state of Florida? So it actually was more about that than what it was made out to be. And then it blew up. I've never seen anything blow up like that. And so again, but
as a comms person, you had to know it was going to.
Well, yes, to some extent we did. But it's we've done some controversial things in my time in the Young Republicans, and sometimes there's these you have a lot of people that do good work throughout the rest of the year, doing all kinds of things, working on issues. And the Young Republicans don't get any attention or coverage for the most part. And we get nothing from the party or anything. They do not
get on the air here, though.
We do here. But if we weren't doing controversial things to get people to pay attention, people only pay attention to the Young Republicans when they do something outside the lines.
When you had Laura Loomer as a guest, who I covered that when you brought in a couple years ago. And by the way, this is amazing because and that was considered controversial because she has a reputation. We all
she has some pretty wild views.
Well, sure. Right. No, the anti-Muslim comments predominantly is what was really put her out of social media at the time, a couple years ago. But, now we are where we're at in 2025 here, where she has this incredible access to President Donald Trump and is apparently, telling people who he should fire and not. I mean, that is, we haven't even talked about what's really going on. I mean, other than the thing with the Capitol Police with Donald Trump, because, again, we could just dominate this whole discussion about that. But what do you think about that? You did bring Laura Loomer in, and I'm glad you did. By the way, I thought it was very interesting. Because what's fascinating for me watching that, and I wrote about this for the Florida Phoenix, was because she's such a Trump person and hated Ron DeSantis, maybe still does, and was saying the most wicked things that in a Republican club.
And we endorsed Ron DeSantis. That was kind of
that was a close vote for you guys.
It was 51%, and we did it anyway. We endorsed Ron DeSantis as the Tampa Bay Young Republicans. We were the only GOP organization in the state to do that. I like to remind him about that if I can, because sometimes he gets a little mad at us for certain other things that we do. But
the governor?
Yeah. So we endorsed Ron DeSantis, and then we turned around and we had a lot of very angry Republicans who were like, no, we love Trump. And so then it was like, well, let's bring the biggest DeSantis hater we can,
right,
and bring him in and get both sides of the argument. And as somebody who's been around the leadership of the young Republicans for a while, I'm a bit of a showman with it, as you may have noticed, Mitch. I like to have debate. I like to be able to put people on the stage and have the conversation, because I don't believe that so many people love to yell at people on the internet, right? Everybody has an opinion on Twitter when they can go on there and be like, this person's horrible, this person's horrible, this person's horrible. Well, if you think they're so horrible, then let's bring them in and debate them and have a conversation, or listen to them, or yell at them, curse them out. I don't care. Have the conversation in person. We don't do anything in person anymore. So it's a bit of like, let's bring people in to hear them out on their side, especially when they represent a big chunk of people online.
Well, let's bring this up about that, because I know the thing that the right has talked about the left being is like cancel culture and all that. Mm-hmm. And yet we're really seeing a lot of that with the Trump people, I feel, on certain issues where, and again, the inconsistency. And I know that's kind of politics a lot. You say one thing, then you're in power, and it's the complete opposite. It's very frustrating following this thing. But I know that has been a key that people have criticized, and sometimes probably correctly so, but other times maybe a little over the top, about how the Democratic Party, who has not inclusive, not allowing here differing voices, that they and the cancel culture kind of philosophy, which I know you don't like that at all, and that you do embrace bringing controversial people. But do you think that you see some of that now happening on the right at all?
Yeah, there's obviously. I started doing stuff with the Young Republicans around 2018 or so. And we might bring in a Republican consultant, and the Republicans will yell at me, right? Because they don't like that consultant. We can bring in John Morgan. if you want to get into cannabis, we did a debate with John Morgan, and then SAM, which is an anti-marijuana organization. Right. And I still get yelled at for bringing in John Morgan to an event. And so there is an element of cancel culture that exists on the right, especially and in the Republican politics, especially in Florida. They don't necessarily want you to have certain people. Rick Scott will come to me, and he will walk up and he will say every time, I love the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, because when he was running for governor, he was not allowed to speak at GOP meetings. This was a long time ago.
2010,
before my time in politics. But he would remind me every time I talked to him. He goes, the Tampa Bay Young Republicans were the first organization to ever put me on a stage. It was. I
think you put that on your website.
We put it on the website. Yeah, because
a quote.
Because the GOP said that he couldn't speak. That he was not supposed to win that election.
Right. Bill McCollum was the guy.
Yeah. So Republican cancel culture has existed for a long time. And then, you see how it works out sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Again, 11:38 right now. If you're listening to this WMNF 88.5 FM, you're listening to us here, The Skinny. I mentioned Kansas a bit a moment ago because, that goes back to Hope Florida, right? Because we had the issue where that money, that $10 million went to the anti-Amendment 3 campaign. Donald Trump right now, Joe Biden began the idea of looking at rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. I don't know why it didn't happen, because he began that in 2022. But nevertheless, that's where we're at right now. Now I see, SAM actually is one of the groups that I get emails from them saying, like, stop Donald Trump from doing this. Are you optimistic? Now, we should say Donald Trump, of course, endorsed Amendment 3 last year, the cannabis measure, which got 56% of the vote, obviously had support, and it's going to be back on the ballot likely again next year. What do you think about Trump and rescheduling cannabis?
Well, let me start off with saying that I was our political director for the Amendment 3 campaign with Smart and Safe Florida last year. That was on the Republicans. I'm a Republican, and I'm for marijuana. And I have not been shy about that, and I've been very out front about that. Sometimes people pretend that I'm, hiding it or something. But this is something that I believe. Look, I just believe that marijuana should be legal. I could go on for another hour about why. Now, I think it's funny that you say that Joe Biden started the rescheduling conversation, because I think it started way before Joe Biden.
But he actually put it in, the FDA to start looking at this, right?
Yeah, but I think that there's been a lot of just placating, from, and this was a Democrat issue. This is an issue that, beyond my personal beliefs and morality and all that kind of stuff, politically, Republicans are going to steal this from Democrats. And that's, I think Donald Trump understands that. I think that there are a lot of smart people behind the scenes that also understand that this issue, I think that everybody within the cannabis industry believed it was going to be a Democrat that did this. Of course, it's going to be a Democrat that does this. And then here we are, and Donald Trump is going to be the biggest momentum push for reforming cannabis. And I think you're going to see rescheduling happen, as he said, within a few weeks. And that was a few weeks ago. So I think honestly, any day now. I don't have any insider information. I don't work in cannabis,
right.
and I it was a short period in my life. But from everything I understand, just reading the tea leaves, cannabis reform is coming from Donald Trump, and even people are going to have to contend with that.
Yeah. Okay. Hey,
Jake, I'm a little bit curious. How much does your club regret that little short period where you had a president in there for a little bit and all that stuff that kind of happened?
I think it's rough. Again, sometimes there's a saying about it only takes like a few days to ruin the reputation of something you've done for many, many years, and that's something that's frustrating to me. Where again, when I took over the organization, it was 2018, and you build something up and you build this huge thing, and then you even plan a successor who I thought did a great job, and then you plan a successor. Sometimes you don't plan a successor, and they can do something that damages the reputation of the organization. So I think that there are a lot of people within. We've got 500 members. People are upset about some of the things that go on with the young Republicans, and I like to say we got the train back on the tracks. I've stepped back in a little bit more to kind of clean things up. I took a break for a while to run for office for State House in 2022, and so I kind of sometimes you let go of the wheel.
Before we bring up our next guest here, Jake, let's talk about that for a moment. You did have a race in 2022, lost a Republican primary here in Hillsborough County to Marilyn Gonzalez-Pittman, and it was a close race, I believe.
200 votes.
Okay, I forgot
I'm
it was that
very
close.
aware.
I forgot it was that close.
I'm very aware.
Are you ever going to run again?
I'm very low on the totem pole, when it comes to Republican politics, and so
You mean in terms of like the people who would want to support you, like the establishment?
Just you see how Republican politics works, right? A congressional seat opens up, well, then they pull the CFO of the state, right? I mean, this is something that young people have to deal with.
There's going to be a state Senate seat available now with Jay Collins leaving.
There will be, and the state Senate will make a decision on who they want to give a lot of money to. And that's just how politics works. And sometimes, as a young Republican, it's been one of my biggest frustrations, and I express it to every politician I can. And I think there's a total agreement on the young Democrat side, too, where I actually think they do a better job on the young Democrat side on embracing younger candidates. But from a young Republican side, everyone comes up to you and says, "Oh my gosh, you're the future. You need to get involved. You need to run. And then the moment you run, they're like, whoa. Wait. This person's got you have 20 more years before you can.
You got to wait your turn.
You can wait your turn. It's not. You don't even necessarily hear you have to wait your turn. You just hear, well, this other person this other person did that. This other person, and then I think that there's always a bit of that.
They don't tell you that, but it's implied completely.
It's totally implied. And then you see that if you watch closely, like you guys do, you'll watch young candidates from the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, even in this area, who will run. And then all of a sudden they kind of get forced out.
Sometimes I wonder how you're still around in the Republican Party, because sometimes when you do, kind of clash with some of the views that are happening on a wider scale.
Yeah, look, there are. I think that cannabis is the big one over the past year. That's obviously been pretty polarizing.
I saw you support solar power.
Yes, yeah, that is well.
And the state hates this, and so does Donald Trump. What's up with that?
It's funny. There's a lot more nuance to a lot of these issues. That's the problem that people don't see, is because people look at this surface level. I don't like the smoke of marijuana. I don't like the smell because I walk outside. Okay, well, let's have a conversation about all of the synthetic products that are in gas stations. Why are they there? What's going on? Is that not the cause of a lot of your issues? That's a lot more dangerous. That's the environment that we live in. I don't care how you feel about marijuana. This is the environment we live in. So why wouldn't you legalize the real thing and then regulate this other industry that's totally unregulated and unsafe? And a lot of people will tell you it's unsafe. People don't want to look at the gray area that exists there and that what a better policy position would be. Solar is the same way. People are like, I don't want my national park taken over by solar farms. Yeah, me either. Right? That doesn't mean that solar.
Right, it has to be one or the other.
It doesn't have to be that. And that's where, and then solar I could go on for a while about too. But
why is the state so down on it? I mean, they not only electric vehicles. I mean, they've done a lot of policy in the last couple of years to really push Floridians who, the utility companies have finally embraced this here in Florida.
A little bit
because the price has gone down. It's a business, issue for them. But because we didn't have it as nearly as much as 10 years ago, which we should have probably. But the federal, they're getting rid of the tax credit, which is coming up on December 31st, is going to be devastating to the local industry here and state industry.
Yeah. So look, the solar industry runs into some of the same issues that we're just talking about, where there's bad actors. There's people have bad experiences. Some solar, bro came to their house. They're 23 years old. They sell them on something that's way too expensive, on a product that doesn't work, and then they got a tax credit. They're just trying to make a sale. And so they've got to deal with that kind of thing. And then now they've got a bad taste in their mouth on solar forever now, because a salesman walked into their house and made it and did that. And then you see stories like, we're taking over this beautiful natural area to make a big solar farm. And now it's a big solar farm, and that's ugly. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And again, there's a gray area and a nuance to, well, if you actually were able to continue to improve this technology, maybe put it in parking lots where it's already ugly in a parking lot, right? Or you put it on on roofs and things like that, like in a way that are done. Battery power. There's a Republican argument to be had there of independence and all that stuff. Obviously, utility companies don't really love it. They don't really want you to be off the grid or anything. But a lot of Republicans would love to be off the grid, out in the middle of Florida on their own solar power. And some are.
Ray, we got a guest here. What's in Jersey?
Yeah, absolutely. Jake Hoffman, by the way, thank you so much for joining us.
Jake, you stick around here. Yeah.
Luis Antonio Salazar is here. He is the leader of Hillsborough County's LGBTQ plus caucus. He's also moving just down the street from here, and thank you for coming in, for taking some time off for that. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Doing the move, realizing the cost of it is a little bit hurting. We've now reached about the $5,000 mark just to move from one house to another, so that hurts a little in the pocket. Can only imagine what people are going through right now. Yeah,
relocation is something, and talking about what people are going through, the Democratic Party is going through it. It really is. And I know in a lot of ways, you would envy the Republican position right now. They're in power. They're just doing a lot of things, sucking a lot of air as far as media attention. How is it going with the Hillsborough Democrats? I know there's been some splits and some factions, but how is your caucus feeling, and how is it adjusting to everything and being able to kind of play to both sides there?
So right now, basically at our caucus and what we're doing with our organization is continuing the work, right? I don't have time for squabbles. I don't have time for people to be basically taking their head out of where to do what they're going to do. We're going to continue working. We're going to continue getting people registered to vote, which is highly important, getting people on vote by mail, and going into our communities like we have for the last 3 years. We have a lot of issues in the Democratic Party. It is very evident. There's a lot of internal fighting going on. But if you really want change, you got to keep going. Right now, we really need to focus on the local organizations that are doing the work on the ground every single day and highlight them for doing that. Because if we focus on all the fighting and all the other stuff that's going on, we're not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be one squabble after another. Like Jake was talking about, you have people that just don't like being in the room with each other. It doesn't matter who it is. That happens in the Democratic Party, too. There's a hierarchy. You are on a waiting list. You can't just run for office because there's people that have been waiting in line, right? So if we continue doing that, we're not going to go anywhere successful. So at our caucus, we are continuing the work and moving forward.
I am fascinated, Louis, because we talk about Hillsborough County, and right now, we've seen the county go red, right, the last couple of elections, just like Florida has. But I was looking the other day at the Hillsborough, voter registration. It's not outrageous. I think it's 17,000 roughly right now, Republicans more than Democrats. I think about this as we go into the 2026 cycle. Again, we mentioned a moment ago, there's a state Senate seat that's going to be open. We don't know what the election is, but Jay Collins, of course, the new lieutenant governor, that is open. That was a seat that, even though he won by 10 points a couple of years ago, or 2022, that was Janet Cruz's seat a few years ago. And certainly the Republicans thought it was going to be closer than that. That's why Ron DeSantis got rid of Sean Harrison and put Jay Collins in there. Is that a seat you guys are excited about?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right now we have a guy named Brian Nathan, who's a union guy. He's going to be running for that. He's already declared, so he's running. He's going. He's a great individual, and has working class families in mind. Right. I come from a working class family, and to be quite honest with you, I'm tired of electing lawyers. We need to elect people that know what's the difference between having to put food on the table and paying the electric bill.
That's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
I don't
And that
like
is-
elected
There's a lot of
lawyers.
lawyers in Tallahassee. I always feel though it's one way because that job is so hard. Where like, who gets a job where you can be out of your office for 4 months out of the year?
Yeah.
Lawyers can do that basically, right?
They
Because they can
can.
pick their own schedule. Hey, having both these guys here, I wanted to ask you about something that just came up the last week here locally. I know maybe we'll do more about this later on. It's about HART, okay? Hillsborough Area Regional Transit. I think that's what it stands for.
Yep.
So Michael Owen, Hillsborough Republican, came out and actually I guess he talked to the Tampa Bay Business Journal, and then everybody's been following that reporting because Michael hasn't talked to other people. But he says basically this legislation, he wants to dismantle HART and replace it with a Tampa-only transit agency. The bill hasn't been filed yet, but reportedly it would operate within city limits and could potentially be funded by a city sales tax instead of a property taxes from the entire county. Starting with you, Louis, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, no, I've been hearing about this as well. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think we could afford it. It's going to cost a lot of money. And right now, public transportation is already shot as it is, right? We're not doing well at it compared to other major cities that are as big as ours. So doing that is only gonna make it worse. We don't have the financial capability of doing it, and it's just not plausible right now.
What do you think, Jack?
So one of the big things that you see, obviously, is this push to eliminate property tax.
Right.
And as we've been doing legislation from the Tampa Bay Young Republicans every year. And last year we were off on a anti-weather modification tangent. That was our thing last year, which passed, which is great. That came out of left field, but it worked, and we got that passed. This year, obviously, we're not going to be the ones to create the idea, but we're kind of inserting ourselves into the property tax conversation and trying to figure out what an actual plan looks like what can be done to actually eliminate
Because
property tax.
I think it's a little scary the way that Governor DeSantis and Blazing Golia are campaigning almost 3 times a week to say we got to get rid of this. We don't know what this is going to look like.
Absolutely, there's no plan.
Well, right now, right? They're going to vote
and that's
on it.
the discussion that we're
Right.
having,
But-
trying to figure out how can you replace that? Because obviously, property tax is very, very high. And as a young person, I see the discussions that are taking place, and there's discussions on increasing the homestead exemption. If you look at the homestead exemption, for example, it used to, when it first started, it was 100% of your home if you actually lived there. By the time you get to like the 80s, it covered the equivalent of like 50% of a home value. By the time that we've bought now as millennials, it's like 10% of the home value. $25,000 is like 10% of the average home value. So we're getting what I just think we're getting screwed as young people, and this is something that we've got to figure out how to balance it a little bit better. And to go back to HART, I can't say that I've dug in enough to what's going on in HART.
Introduced it. I just know the concept. Yeah.
But what I'll say is that everything I've heard from people who've been on the HART board, people who've been around HART, people who work for HART, is that there's been a huge mismanagement of money and scandal over decades. And
I think there was some, and it started to cool down than it was. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
It's
It's
better
better than it was.
around that. It's getting better slowly.
So sometimes agencies maybe do need some reform. I don't know. Again, if it meant that we could lower my property taxes and pay more on sales tax in the city of Tampa and still get the equivalent type of services, then I would be for that, because our property taxes are very, very high.
I guess the concept though is people in the outside of Tampa don't really take the bus, right? I mean, the fact that he's willing to.
I mean, I think
It's
the
not that
claim
they
is
don't
that
take the bus; it's that it's not accessible to them.
they
is
would
what the
probably
problem
take
is.
it if it was available more, and then that'll be the big thing, right? It's like people out in the county now they're not going to have a bus. Like, how's that going to work? Because the fact of the matter is, people that live outside of city limits taking the bus into the city to work a job.
Also, with gentrification going on, where do you think these people are going? They're being pushed out to the county, right? So
Right.
if you live in
Yeah,
the
for
county,
sure.
you have a job in the city. How are you going to get to work if you don't have a car?
Well, I would
This-
assume there'd be some sort of, maybe I'm wrong here, but I would assume that there'd be some sort of, HART type of organization that the county would put together too on top
Right.
of what
I mean,
they're
yes,
separate.
again, we don't know all the details, and to be
Yeah.
fair about this, but I think there might be some kind of interlocal agreement that would
Yeah.
have to happen, because you're right. I mean, I don't think they're going to cut cold turkey. People from Brandon, for example, who I do believe the Hearts,
I think
runs
number
out
8
here.
goes out there
Yeah, I
and
think so.
stuff. I want to pivot a little bit and go back to the Democrats, Luis. David Jolly. I mean, right now, I know we're kind of a long way out here, but it kind of just looks like he's the guy. Nobody's stepped up to kind of offer an alternative for governor. Obviously, recently converted from the Republican Party to Democrats. One, how skeptical are you of that kind of change and jumping into the race? And then two, do you think anybody's going to emerge to kind of challenge Jolly's
Absolutely. There's a lot of names in the rumor mill. You all probably know them. That are going to be
tell us.
Jerry Demings.
Well, Jerry Demings is one of them.
Al
Lawson,
former North Florida congressman.
Maybe Mr. Warren. We'll see what happens.
I have not heard Andrew Warren.
Andrew's going to be mad.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, these are all rumors, right? Until they actually declare, nothing happens. And it is David Jolly right now. He is the candidate.
How do you feel about him?
There is a huge split in our party. Like, we don't trust people that convert. And I also think it's kind of hypocritical of us to be really accepting of him when we had Susan Valdez who traded parties to be a Republican and we all hated her, and now we have this guy that's trying to be a Democrat, and all of a sudden we're all supposed to jump in and say, hey, we're all jolly for jolly.
Well, that's interesting, Louis, because I know there's some on the right who are not embracing Susan Valdez.
What a transition here, because
why are you guys agreeing on so much stuff?
Because I got in a lot of trouble, as I get into all the time, because when Susan Valdez did come over to become a Republican, I was like, and then the governor and the state house and all the leadership and everybody was like, we have to embrace her. And I was like, why? I'm like, a week ago she was going to run the Democratic Party in our county and run against us and everything. Why on earth would I endorse somebody and give them a life vest to come over to be a Republican now? And we're all supposed to just open with open arms because you changed from an R to a D. And so
we're going through a similar thing right now. I mean, I've heard him speak. I think he's a great guy. He says all the right things. There is just a period right now where we're trying to decide if this is someone that we see leading our party to the governor's mansion.
And
right?
how do you square that?
Again,
well, by the way, we're speaking with Luis Antonio Salazar. He leads the Hillsborough County LGBTQ+ caucus. You talked about him speaking. He is really great. We've had him on the show. He was at the immigration town hall, and we talk about winning over voters. And I really applaud you for being here, because you're the only person who's going to speak to this. We sent out a question. There was a disruption at that immigration town hall. Folks in the front row who felt like they had their hand up for a long time. One of them had to have an outburst. And those are voters in the Democratic Party who feel like they're being ignored right there to their face. How do you keep them in your party? They're not like Republicans that are always going to come home.
Exactly. And, our caucus specifically has been working with making a connection with young people, again, for the last 3 years as I've been president, because it is important to bring them to the table and make sure that they have an opportunity to lead. I think right now Democrats across the board have all held on to power a little too long, and they don't want to let go. They haven't mentored anyone to take their position, and now we're stuck with a Congress and a Senate that looks like a retirement home. So that's not what we want. We want to make sure that young people have an opportunity to run, to be able to win, to support them, and to also give them spaces in which they can speak about what their positions are and how they want to see their future. Again, I'm 42 years old. In the gay world, I am old as hell.
But you get kicked out of Young Republicans too.
I'm old, but I encourage young people. I every single day go out there and make sure that they have a platform, right? And I am at the age right now where I have to wear reading glasses, so it's real, And I know that young people are hungry, and I know that it's time to pass on the baton. Right? Again, we need to have people running this country that know what's going on in their neighborhoods, and nobody knows that better than young people. And young people just need us to back off and not be greedy and not be power hungry, and maybe actually try to create some positive change, not just for one party, but for both parties, for all of the people that they represent.
We only have about a minute left. I wanted to ask both Jake Hoffman and Luis about the street crossings issue here. I hear there's going to be some things going on this weekend, right? Do you know anything about that, Luis?
Yeah, so there's the protests actually going across the state, and this is just. When I heard about this, I was extremely angry. They decided to start a war on a memorial where blood was spilt. right?
Pulse Cycling.
of Impulse in Orlando, where our friends, our families, brothers and sisters died. And you should be equally as angry that they're getting rid of Back the Blue across the streets as well, because that also memorializes police officers that have died as well. And if you think that I, as a Democrat, don't like the police, you are wrong. I think that the police should protect me just as equally as everybody else. I want safe neighborhoods. I want safe schools for my kids to go to. I want to make sure that my neighborhood is something I'm proud of. And doing this is totally a waste of time, a waste of money, and an insult in the face to all the people that died.
Jake, we just have a few seconds. What do you think about this issue that's surfaced this week?
I think, look, I'm going to side with the governor on this. I think that sometimes there's a lot of, drawing on sidewalks and murals and everything like that, and then maybe sometimes they shouldn't be permanent. Now, at the same time, there's some that look good. Right. And it's like it enhances the neighborhood. So I don't know. It's kind of a balance. Like, I don't know if this was the fight that I would pick with the governor, but we'll see how things go for everyone who has.
And that's not even saying what the actual laws actually say, but that is going to be our time today. Jake Hoffman, president of the Tampa Bay Young Republicans.
No, executive director.
Executive director. Again at the lead, at the helm.
4 presidents away.
Okay, again at the helm. Luis Antonio Salazar, leader of Hillsborough County's LGBTQ+ Democratic Caucus. My name is Ray Roa. Mitch Perry is my co-host on behalf of Skip Sassy running the boards. And I'm sorry I didn't get our phone answers. Anthony on the phones. Thank you so much for doing that. Joe Ellen is in Studio One. The lights look pretty right for Art in Your Ear there. And it's looking like it's going to be a great show. Thank you so much for supporting WMNF Tampa today and every day. Happy Labor Day weekend. Go hug somebody that works really hard so that you can eat some food.